Hello, everyone. I'm glad you could all join the call today. For those of you that don't recognize my voice, I'm Maureen Zerfus, and I'm the chair of the BC Economic Development Association. For those that don't know, I'm going to give you a quick update on Dale. Dale had open heart surgery on the 14th. He had a quintuple bypass, and he's doing fine. He sent me a couple texts and is eager to get back to work. So I want to thank everyone that sent their kind wishes and offers their support. Many of you have asked where to send flowers. We're asking that you donate to the BCEDA Community and Crisis Fund. This is a fund that's near and dear to Dale's heart. His biggest concern when I spoke to him the day before surgery was that he was not able to help the communities in need. So this is one way to help the communities, and I know Dale would appreciate it. We've set up a link at the bottom of our BCEDA COVID-19 resource page that's located on our website for your convenience. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Colleen Bond, who's agreed to help us out with these calls and with the association until Dale is recovered. Colleen.
Thank you very much for that, Maureen. I appreciate it. Yes, so as Maureen said, I'm Colleen Bond, and I've worked and known Dale for many years now. Some of you will know me and some of you don't. But as Maureen said, I've been asked to fill in where I can to help BCEDA do these webinars and a few other things to support Ashley, as she's a one-man team, so to speak, now. And again, as Maureen mentioned, Dale's surgery did go very well. He'll be in hospital for at least another 4 days or so, maybe a week, before he's able to go home and start the recovery there. Again, he's really very thankful for the well wishes that he's received and the kind thoughts that everybody has for him. So thank you so much for that. So a few housekeeping items, I guess, to sort of get out of the way. I want people to turn on their videos and microphones if they are on. And I would also like to let you know that we are recording this video. And we want to do that so that we can access information that perhaps they missed because they had to leave the meeting early, or perhaps they weren't able to join the meeting live. So that'll be available on the BCEDA website. We think everybody, for the most part, certainly is familiar with Zoom by now. It's really interesting how easy and how fast it can get up to speed on new technologies and new things that happen in our world to be. So there is a box feature that Zoom offers. I encourage you to open up the use that you have it open. And put in your questions there. We're going to have that monitored. Ashley's watching it there. And we'll have that monitored for any of your questions that you may have as we go through the call today, as well as questions or comments, that sort of thing.
Hi, Colleen. Ashley here.
Yes.
We're having a little bit of audio problems. Can we ask everyone to stop sharing video? If you look down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you want to make sure that your mute and your video are off.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Hopefully that improves things. Back to the chat box. Yes, put your questions in there. I know we do have some representatives from different agencies and organizations that are really interested in hearing what you have to say with regards to perhaps some of the challenges.
Colleen,
yeah.
Colleen, it's Maureen.
Yes.
Are you moving away from your computer
I am
when you're
not.
talking?
I'm not. Are we also
maybe
having audio?
Yeah, you're there and then you're missing. Maybe try phoning in through the phone line.
Okay.
Because I know I've had to do that with the lines I've been on. I can do audio, or I can do visual and watch the screens, but I have to phone in to get any kind of reception. So maybe just do a quick call in.
Okay, and in the meantime, I'll keep doing, is this better here now?
It's better now, yeah.
Okay, let me just stay right here. I won't move a muscle.
Okay.
All right, let's try this again. So in the chat box, yeah, just put any of those questions, any of those comments, and we'll certainly pass it on to the province and those other agencies who are really interested in hearing what you have to say. So let's get to the next slide here. There we go. Just a quick review of what happened the first week that the call was here, which was and Dale talked about what BCEDA has done and what we're doing.
No, Colleen, we're losing you again.
Gosh, okay. I am going to try to call in. Did you want to talk about this slide while I do that, Maureen? Is that helpful in any way?
Sure, call in quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe Ashley, you can jump in too. I know Ashley's been very diligently working on our BCEDA business guidebook. It gets updated as the announcements come on, so definitely that's a place, especially if you're a small one-man organization. Don't reduplicate the work, use what we've already got. Ashley, can you help me out here? Oh,
Yes, I just need to find the unmute button.
Okay, you do that and I'll help Colleen.
All right, so we've got a lot of new stuff as of today, a lot of activity announcements from the government today. They've all been added to the BCEDA business counts, the business resource guide. We're hearing about a little more focus on small business, which is exciting. That's probably the #1 question that we're being asked, or we're hearing asked by businesses, is those sole proprietors who still, mom and pop shops don't qualify for the existing resources that are available for businesses.
Unmute.
And Ashley, I'm still on the, I'm still trying to connect by phone as well. I noticed that Paula, I believe, is here. So do we want to just jump right to the speakers and we can get back to this other stuff once I connect properly?
I think that's a great idea, Colleen.
Okay, so Paula, if you are there, which I believe you are, if you can unmute yourself, we would love to hear from you.
Sure, thanks very much, and happy to be on the line. I think lots of folks have been following the news and the announcements that have been made federally. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of insight into how those programs are working, but I'm not going to dwell too much on the broad assistance that's being provided by the government to business. I'm going to focus a little bit more on what's being done by BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, and our sister Crown Corp, EDC. Now, I'm not sure if some of my colleagues are going to be on shortly.
I'm here, Paula.
Okay, that's great. Hey, Bryan. So I'll give the broad picture, but I do think that it'll be interesting also to hear from my colleague Bryan Hughes at EDC, and then happy to answer questions. Are folks able to hear me on the line? I'm seeing the messages pop up. Okay, great. Super. So I'm going to start off, presumably BDC is known To most of you, BDC is the bank for entrepreneurs. We have 3 business lines that we deploy to support businesses in normal times: financing, capital, and advisory services. And at this point in time, I will say that the organization is very much focused on the first 2. Perhaps during a more when the economy starts to move to more of a recovery phase, we may focus back again on our advisory services. But at this point in time, the things I'm going to be talking about are certainly finance related. So I want to start off with the obvious first choice for businesses at this point in time, and this is about this is with respect to interest-free loans that are available to cover the operating costs of your business, and that is the Canada Emergency Business Account. That's a $40,000 loan that's provided through commercial banks, and basically it's guaranteed by government. It's important that folks know that at this point in time, it's available to businesses with a $50,000 to $1 million payroll. So that's the eligibility criteria at this point in time. But the most interesting feature of this support, I'm seeing some notes that it changed today. I've been working through some other things today, but so that maybe that threshold has changed. The most important feature of this support, which I believe has not changed, is the fact that a portion of that loan could be forgiven if the balance is repaid before December 22nd. So December 31st, 2022. So that's definitely something for businesses to look at. And again, that's available through your financial institution. Second, and this is where I'd invite Bryan to jump in if he sees fit. Basically, BDC and EDC are working together to be able to provide supports to businesses. And this is a program that's not finalized yet. I believe it'll be finalized in the next week or 2, but it's basically for small and medium-sized enterprises. It's a loan guarantee from EDC, or a loan that would be available from BDC. So essentially, the way we see it is that EDC would be better equipped to provide support if a company has an operating line of credit, for example, and if cash requirements exist, then BDC can step in. The truth is that both of these options can be used together, and basically the total support would be provided through the financial institution, and BDC and EDC will be in the background. So essentially the terms and conditions that your bank would offer, they'd be able to do that in confidence because, or with confidence rather, because our institutions would be behind them for up to 80% of the value of that loan. So just wanted to cover that off, and I'm going to speak to a final option, basically these three tools are the ones that are most advanced in this particular scenario. The third option, if you're unable to work with your financial institution, would be a working capital loan from BDC. So that facility is up to $2 million in working capital, and it can be used for any number of aspects of running your business. Although there are wage support programs that might be worth pursuing if you're really looking at supporting your staff. But essentially that $2 million in working capital is available through BDC, and you can either approach us through our client contact center or directly through one of our many business centers in BC and North. So just we'll pause there. I see that there's lots of questions popping up, and happy to answer any of those questions or to pass it on to Bryan.
So it's Bryan. I'm open. Colleen, do you want me to add a few comments, or would you prefer to the questions be addressed?
This is Ashley here. You can go ahead and jump in, Bryan. Thank you.
Okay. Paula has actually given a pretty good overview, and this is a really savvy audience. I can tell because they're right up to speed on the most recent Canada Emergency Business Account criteria, which is, you are correct, $20,000 would be the lowest, and $1.5 million would be the maximum. So any company with payroll last year between those two numbers would qualify. And it's a great loan at 2 years interest-free, and $10,000 or 25% could be forgiven if you pay early, and that would be before December 31st, 2022. So it's a really good deal. What I wanted to talk about was just a little bit different from Paula, and if I could, for all of the audience here, something we've been talking to our customers about, and that is getting prepared to talk to a banker. And what you want to do, in our view, we've been coaching our customers, and what we've been telling them is, before you go and speak to your banker, get a 2 or 3 page document ready. The document needs to address the following: what's changed in your business plan now as opposed to what you would have shown a banker in February? So your revenues, what are your projected revenues for September, October, November, for Q3, Q4? How have they changed? Are they about 40% of what you had before? Are they 50, 60? What's your confidence factor on those? And what about the impact on your costs? You need to show the banker that you've thought about this, that you have a sustainable plan, and you need to be realistic with where your company's going. You basically have to build some confidence with your banker before you're going to ask them for some more funds. And I think this applies for the larger BCAP support, which is the $6 million, 6.25 that Paula was talking about, but it also applies to the $40,000. All of the credit unions and the banks that are going to be providing the Canada Emergency Business Account option, if you think about it, they're going to be providing that loan to their member, the company members, if it's a credit union, or if it's a bank, to a customer of theirs. I can't say for sure, but I don't know that there's going to be a lot of reception for a company that is shopping among different banks, because it's really up to the bank to provide the loan, and the bank needs to onboard you. So the best chance is to go to the banker that you've been banking with already. And in my view, when you approach that banker, if you were proactive and you had a 2 or 3 page summary of where you think your business is at and where it's going to go the rest of the year, you're going to have a reception, a good reception. So with that, I'll stop and field questions, same as Paula.
Ashley, do you just want to read some of the questions out?
Yeah, or if anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question as well.
So it's Paula here. Should we take a look at some of the questions that are in the chat? I'm just trying to see.
I'm just trying to see the questions.
So I've got one if I could offer up.
Great.
Okay, my name's Terry and my question is in the chat. And so my question was about the eligibility for those loans, and you talked about having a payroll of between 20,000 and 1.5 million. So I know some companies that are in the entertainment business, and while they don't have actual employees, the people they hire on a contract basis. So would they be still eligible for this type, for the Canada Business Emergency loan, or do they actually have to be salaried employees?
So it's Bryan. I can field this one, Paula, if you want.
Sure, that's great. Thanks.
They need to be salaried employees. You need to show that you've been paying payroll taxes the year before for year 2019. You need to be a company, and you need to show payroll taxes of anywhere between $20,000 and up to 1.5 million. Those will be two of the criteria. So you have to be a company. You have to be a company in Canada, and you need to have the evidence.
So proprietorships would not be eligible, or you talked about small business mom and pop operations that are not legal companies, but they're still they might have a payroll. Will they not be eligible then?
There you got me. That would be one to talk to your financial institution, and each financial institution, they'll have the answer to that one. You have me.
Okay, thank you.
Not sure. Sorry.
I think I saw another one there from Melanie Roop. Hey, Melanie. The BCAP loans and loan guarantees, basically that program was announced prior to any negotiation of the documentation with the financial institutions. So that's been occurring, and at least all I can really tell you from the BDC perspective is that it is ongoing, and we're hopeful that that documentation will be concluded next week. But it's difficult for us to say how quickly it will roll out through the financial institutions. So they've been working incredibly fast. I think there's like 40 institutions that are negotiating this, which is pretty significant. And that finalized program is going to be rolled out, but it may take some time to be communicated throughout those large organizations.
Okay, it's Colleen here, and can everybody hear me now? Am I finally in?
I think we got you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah, I was confident we had this down at the beginning, but obviously we're not. But that's the great thing about economic development and the people that work in the field is we're adaptable and flexible, and we get things to work eventually. So thank you for that presentation. I do appreciate it. I apologize, I missed about half of it. If there's no other questions, we can continue with the tourism presentation, and then we can do some of the other things that I was going to talk about, if that sounds good for everyone.
David here. I did post a question when looking for a loan, as was described, and preparing scenarios. To what extent should a business factor in a possible second wave of infections beginning in, say, September, October? That's supposed to be expected?
I'll take a first crack, and then Paul, I'll give you a really good answer. So it's Bryan. We have found actually that some sectors are amazingly doing well. So, for example, the lumber sector, the demand is strong, and to a degree, some of the paper sectors, and of course some of the food sectors. So, my answer would be the goal really is for you to establish confidence that between you and your banker. I would say your plan should really show a realistic plan that's going to show that you're going to survive, and if you survive, you can also thrive if the banker could support you with some funding, and that's really the goal to go in, as opposed to just having a sense of how much money you need. You need to show, I think, the banker that you've trimmed your cost, you've scaled appropriately. And so to answer your question, if you factor in a second wave and a scenario that says, well, if I don't make my sales in August and September because there's a second wave, these will be the costs that I cut. And this is why I'm still going to be around in 2021. I think you set yourself ahead of most of the other companies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Bryan. I think you've really done a good job of outlining some of the things that we'd be looking for. And maybe one way to think about it is, you know, a best, worst, and probable scenario. And certainly a second wave is probably trending towards the negative, but it is something that you should consider. So thanks very much.
It's Ashley here. If I could pass along another question from Jeff Monroe. He's asking about a First Nation-owned company. They have payroll, but do not pay payroll taxes. Do they qualify?
I would suggest that group would go to their credit union, wherever they traditionally would run their accounts, and apply.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Appreciate that, Bryan and Paula. If we are ready, we can go on to Destination BC. If you're there and are able to unmute yourself, Maya, that would be awesome.
Yes, hello. This is Maya Lange, Vice President of Global Marketing at Destination BC. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about our tourism marketing, tourism recovery marketing efforts. I'm not sure if I'm able to advance the slides.
I can do that for you. Just give me a heads up and we're ready to go to the next one.
Okay, thank you. So I thought I would just touch on three pieces. One is to set the context for the role and size of the tourism marketing industry in British Columbia, talk a little bit about the impact, and then focus a bit on the recovery efforts that are underway. If you wouldn't mind advancing the slides, please. So I wasn't sure sort of the level of awareness of the tourism industry in British Columbia on this call. So I'm sharing just some of the stats that that we've put together for 2018, just to give you a size of the scale and scope of tourism. So a couple of key ones to focus in on: the generation of 20.5 billion in revenue for the industry. That's across 19,000 tourism businesses and about 66,000 people employed in the industry. So quite a diverse, quite a large industry, made up of small and large organizations. I believe it's over 90% have less than 50 employees. So, you know, and again, it's in all regions of British Columbia. In terms of export revenue, 2018 generated about 7 billion in export revenue. And we welcome about 6 million international arrivals to British Columbia every year, but there are about 23 million trips to or within BC by the domestic and international markets. If you could advance to the next slide. Lining up against the other primary resources in terms of GDP that's generated, tourism is quite substantial in comparison to the other primary industries. If you could advance, please. This is looking at the impact now of COVID-19. This is from the Business Council of BC, and it was developed, the scenarios were developed in late March of, so just a few weeks ago, but seems like a lifetime ago, but a few weeks ago. And they put together two scenarios. One is the best case scenario, which is the lockdown ceases in June, restaurants and bars begin to open in the summer, and then international travel starts up again in the fall, but is slow to resume. And then we will see, of course, many businesses face bankruptcy. Under scenario 2, which is the more likely scenario, we see restaurants and bars opening in the late summer and fall, international travel restricted into, or at least until the end of 2020. And we see significant impact across the board in North America and globally. And you can get a sense of how the industry will be impacted according to the various elements that are in tourism. So quite a significant impact when you're looking at accommodation, and you're looking at arts, entertainment, recreation, air transportation. So we're seeing quite a drastic impact in that more likely scenario 2. And I've included the link for those that are interested in looking at this scenario planning in more detail. If you wouldn't mind advancing. Destination BC has developed forecasts on the impacts as well for the tourism industry. Our 3 scenarios are lined up with a BC Business Council as well. One is in June, July, which is best case. You can get a sense of what the industry loss in terms of revenue would be. By the way, I should mention on the far right is the baseline, is the 2019 values for each of these, and then under each of these scenarios, you can see what the impact would be. Scenario B is in October. Domestic travel resumes, and I should mention each of these scenarios are based on domestic travel resuming. In scenario A, it's in July, scenario B, it's in October, and scenario C is March 2021. So you can see, of course, essentially the entire year of 2020 is wiped out in terms of revenue loss. Quite a deep job loss under that scenario C, and of course government tax revenue loss is significant. Again, scenario B is in our forecast is the likely scenario. If you wouldn't mind advancing, please. In comparing the impact of SARS, 9/11, the global recession, we're seeing that COVID-19 is actually far worse than those 3 combined, in fact. So even looking back, and for those that had been in the industry during those previous significant situations or pandemics, obviously we're facing a whole new scenario. If you wouldn't mind proceeding. So we've developed 3 phases in terms of our recovery marketing. Currently, we're in the response phase right now, which is obviously during the crisis. We're providing significant support in emergency management. We've paused all international and domestic marketing, with the exception of a few things to help reinforce the health message that is being provided by Minister Dix and Dr. Bonnie Henry. And then we're in the process of planning for recovery with a major launch of a domestic campaign. Recovery is obviously the phase when travel restrictions are lifted. In a hopeful scenario, that's in the summer. I should mention the summer would be ideal, obviously for many reasons, but in particular with tourism, the summer season, the 3 key months generate about 50% of all the tourism revenue for the year. So obviously that is an important time frame. But again, realistically, we're looking at an October, most likely an October return to domestic travel. We're focusing on partnerships, both global and local, BC-based, to try to reignite the travel among the domestic market. We feel from the research that we've seen that perhaps the recovery will begin community by community, perhaps region by region, sector by sector. And when it does, it will most likely be a drive tourism market. So where can Metro Vancouverites drive within a 2 to 3 hour radius, perhaps a weekend getaway, and most likely will not be flying initially. So when we look at some of our international markets, in particular the US, which is our largest, by far our largest international market, it is when that opens, will most likely be a drive market, most likely be the drive markets of Washington and Oregon before it is California. And then finally, our third phase is resilience when international travel resumes again. And in an ideal scenario, that will be in the winter of 2020, but most likely will be in spring or later in 2021. If you wouldn't mind, yeah, one more. So the response phase is really, we're in the process of providing timely information during the crisis. We have weekly calls, we have a weekly newsletter, and I've got some more information on those for those of you that are interested in learning more. Right now it's just about sharing timely information, keeping BC as a travel destination top of mind when travel is again possible. Obviously it's not possible now, and we are heavily supporting the health, the health information in terms of ceasing all non-essential travel. And then we're in the process of developing a team that is looking at signals for when we may be nearing recovery, or when we can begin to consider when specific markets are ready to engage with, ready to consider potential travel planning. You see a list of some of the activities that are underway. Obviously, significant industry support and communications. We are activating and working with our global networks of industry. We've got teams in 6 markets around the world, and actively working with them to understand what changes are underway, how the airlines in those key source markets are how the air capacity has been changing. Obviously, some of that was more relevant early on, and of course will become more relevant as we near recovery again. But of course, that's also quite interesting when in the Chinese market, we're beginning to see that market, they're seeing few domestic or zero domestic cases of COVID-19. And so we're all keenly watching and learning from how that market is reacting and when they may consider travel again. So I'll speak to that more in a minute. We're obviously beginning to examine the international marketing campaigns, and then working on a recovery campaigns for the domestic market. Simultaneously, also, we have a division within Destination BC that's looking at growing industry learning, industry capabilities, and looking at shared systems. So when we can take it for those organizations that have teams that are available right now, that they can build that capacity for when we then are in a recovery phase and revenue resumes. So we're building those capabilities in during this time. If you wouldn't mind advancing, please. Some of the work that's underway right now is, and as I mentioned earlier, supporting the health advisories. I'm encouraging British Columbians not to travel now, but to do their part to stop the spread. And so we've launched some materials on our social channels around #ExploreBCLater. That's gaining some traction, sharing those materials with partners all around British Columbia. And in fact, on the next slide, we've also developed a video that some of you might have seen on some social channels or will see on TV, which is a video to recognize the fact that we cannot travel right now and should not travel right now, but that the time will come when travel can resume. We call this the Dream of Later, Dream of Later video. So, and we're quite excited. We received a public service announcement status for that TV spot. So those TV spots are being done at no cost, are being run at no cost, thanks to Bell and Chorus and the Knowledge Network. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about recovery. So just to give you a sense of the size of each of these markets, and then how we are looking at which markets we will initiate, or we believe that we will begin to do some of our recovery marketing in which order. So domestic British Columbia generates about 4 billion annually of that 20 billion. There's about 12 million trips that are taken by British Columbians each year. So you can imagine overnight trips, I should mention, and so that's, you know, each of us take about 3 to 4 trips a year within British Columbia. Alberta is an important market for British Columbia, especially in the Kootenay Rockies and northern BC, and again, a significant revenue generator for tourism. Ontario is a fly market, and we believe after travel comfort increases, that Ontario, with a few months delay, Ontario will be another important source market, will be the third important source market for us after, again, as I said, after travel resumes. And in 2018 had generated about 768 million in revenue for British Columbia. In our international markets, depending on how things progress, so there's a caveat obviously with the order of these markets, but we believe that when the US is ready, our key markets, as I mentioned earlier, Washington, Oregon, key fly market, which generates significant revenue per visit out of California, again, we will resume our marketing efforts, and we believe that this market will be a key to getting back up to those 2019, getting back up to the tourism revenue and volume that we have enjoyed in the past. Asia, obviously, we're seeing positive signs come out of China, Japan, and South Korea. We're monitoring those markets very closely. China, until 2019, China had actually, for a number of years, had been our second largest market after the US. So it was an important generator of revenue for many destinations, or quite a few destinations in BC. Europe, again, we'll have to see about the timing. Some of these markets may resume travel at different paces, but the UK in 2019 overtook China as our second largest market after the US. And of course Germany as well. So collectively they generate about 600 million and about 427,000 visits a year. Mexico, they seem to have been spared what some other destinations and some other countries around the world have had to endure with the pandemic. So we think that they may rebound more quickly than obviously our third region, which is the Pacific. Australia has been a very important market, especially for our ski destinations, our ski resorts around British Columbia, and generate a significant amount of revenue per visit. So of course we're keenly watching those markets as well for when they may resume travel. But because of the length of the flight, we think that they may be among the last to travel to British Columbia in the coming year. The next slide. So just quickly, I mentioned earlier that we've developed a team that is looking at what we're calling signals and sentiments. So understanding what are those signals that indicate that a market is beginning to consider travel again. And this is where we're seeing some positive news come out of China, working with our team and our experts in market there. We're seeing some positive news. Just recently we heard that 90% of the hotels are now open in China with a 30% occupancy, and that's up from 8% during the pandemic. And I believe the 8% may have been due to to essential travel and to healthcare workers in China. So we're seeing some positive news. We're seeing some positive signals out of that market. We've got connections with some of the large travel agencies and platforms such as WeChat and Weibo, and so we begin to look at what their travel planning behaviors are like. Are they increasing their searching for trip ideas? Are they planning booking Are they taking that next step? And so we're beginning to see some changes. Obviously, these are very early on, but again, that's sort of positive news, and that model will help us understand how we might apply those learnings or those insights to other markets, to understand when we should apply and when we should begin to invest in tourism marketing efforts in each of those markets. So, so that's of course key things, and of course there's also some of the interesting marketing efforts that they have underway. They've created a 3-day King Ming holiday to again celebrate the end of COVID, or celebrate coming back out of isolation, and so these kinds of things are also inspiration for things that we may consider doing in British Columbia as well. But again, we're using what we're seeing in China, what we're seeing in South Korea, to help us look at what we may then apply to other markets as well. If you wouldn't mind progressing to the next slide, please. So the key piece under the recovery phase is to generate revenue as quickly as possible for British Columbia. Support and cooperation in the industry. We have a tremendously complex but also very engaged, very collaborative industry, and so that works in our favor when we look at how do we generate that revenue and how can we work closely together to get to recovery as quickly as possible. We're compiling and sharing the insights that we develop, and then I mentioned earlier collaborating with partners, and we've got a tremendous or a very comprehensive partner plan in place that we're in the process of rolling out to expand our impact and reach. So for example, partnerships with BCEDA, ICBC, BC Ferries, airlines, and other large organizations that can help us get the word out and can help really to spur on that domestic traveler. So more to come from that. More to come from those partnerships. And then of course a key component of our destination development team is to of course support the industry to rebuild and create the resilience in a post-COVID world. I mentioned some of the activities, the signals team that we've developed, the domestic campaign that's underway, and then of course there's a number of initiatives underway to help support the communities and businesses when we begin the recovery and when we can begin recovery marketing efforts as well. So we lump those under what we call the Powerful Marketing Network, and some of those initiatives, as I said, are underway. Resilience is really our last phase when we're looking to build this lasting resilient industry with new areas and new activities and new experiences in British Columbia that will inspire the world to want to visit British Columbia again. And so we're in the process of planning out and building out those activities for that future time when we return to the normal pattern of international and domestic travel again. And I think my last slide is just a summary of how you can find out more. We have a webinar every week on Thursdays at 10:30. I encourage you, we share what we're seeing in terms of impact scenarios. We also share what we're hearing out of our markets. We're going to be sharing more around the signals that we're seeing out of each of our markets. So I encourage anyone who's interested to sign up via that email address. There's also an industry newsletter that's sent out every week that has a link to that webinar. So if you're looking to get some of the past webinars, then I encourage you to check out the website destinationbc.ca. And then also if you have any tourism specific questions, there's an email address for you to send some questions in. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
There were indeed a couple of questions. Earlier on in your presentation, you had talked about the government tax loss, and the question was surrounding whether that was federal, provincial, or municipal, or a combination of.
It's provincial tax revenue.
Okay. All right, and another question was, has China dealt with the second wave yet?
I understand that they have not, that they've just begun opening up the markets, but have different practices in place to monitor the increase in cases. I might also say that we are reliant on government sources or what is available publicly from China. So I think perhaps could call into question whether what we're seeing there is accurate, but as it is publicly shared, it doesn't seem that there have been any, there have not been any new cases for the last 2 months. And so again, because they have other practices in place through data monitoring and mobile monitoring to be able to enforce when they need to, but I understand that they have not had any resurgence.
Okay, another question we have is if there is any additional federal or provincial money to support tourism.
Aside from what has been shared federally, I think that's been quite comprehensive in terms of the support for the tourism industry. There have been some really great initiatives that have been launched in BC to help businesses understand what is available to them. And so, for example, on Tourism Vancouver Island has launched a business advisory team to help tourism businesses, and I understand that that is going to be made available around British Columbia. The minister announced that on our weekly webinar call last week. In terms of additional provincial funding, I am not currently aware of any additional announcements, but happy to follow up with you on that.
And a couple of questions with regards to the cruise ship industry. So, so what are those thoughts with regards to the cruise ship industry recovery, and how significant will that recovery be for BC tourism as a whole?
The cruise ship industry is quite an important industry, or quite a significant part of tourism. It generates about $2 billion annually from in British Columbia, obviously through the economic spin-offs and benefits, especially to Vancouver and Victoria. And so the loss of that industry in 2020 is obviously quite considerable. And so there was just a call, I think there's a call tomorrow morning with the cruise industry. But as we understand it now, it will be a long time before that industry recovers. So the season is typically from April, the beginning of April, until the end of September into October. And I don't think that will resume in 2020. Most likely will resume in 2021. And my belief is that consumer attitudes will be quite different towards cruise, especially among the older demographic that have typically been those who have been the largest proportion of cruisers, so to speak.
Okay. And who is it who says when as a province we can open? Is it the BC government itself, or is it the federal government?
I believe that there is a provincial state of emergency, and so I'm not entirely clear as to who overrides who, but I know that the provincial government does have a say as to when businesses will resume. So I believe they work in tandem and would make that a shared announcement.
Okay, and one final question we've got here is who are the key competitors to BC tourism industry? Is it Alberta, other provinces, or is it the international destinations?
It would be, well, it depends on the market that we're looking at. So for international travelers, typically our competitors are Queensland in Australia, obviously like New Zealand. We've seen obviously significant growth in other smaller destinations like Iceland. But those that really offer nature and wildlife as sort of the key benefit when there's a long haul flight that's involved. Obviously California, so the western coast of the US is obviously another key competitor for us. In the domestic market, it would be Washington, California, it would be Hawaii, depending on the time of year, Alberta as well. Typically, we benefit from the work. We work very closely with Alberta. And typically when people, especially from long haul, take a trip to to Alberta, 30% of them come to British Columbia as well. So we benefit from that relationship. We benefit from working together with Alberta. So again, it depends on the market, but our key ones would be Australia, New Zealand, Iceland, the western coast of the US would be the key ones.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. That was a really informative presentation, and obviously a lot of interest, just given the economies of so many of our communities with regards to tourism and that being such an important sector for them. We are almost out of time, so some of the things we were going to go through we don't have enough time for, but I would like to pop back to the beginning. I know some of these slides would have been talked about, but there were a couple of resources that I did really want to mention that were fairly new. I did catch that the Canada Emergency Business Account, you did talk about that one earlier, and there was the mention that it had changed to $20,000 to $1.5 million in total payroll. So there was an adjustment there. Excuse me and apologies if I missed this as I was reconnecting, but the federal government as well announced this morning the new Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And that program is to help small businesses cover their rents for April, May, and June. Since that was just announced this morning, details on that program are going to be forthcoming. The province announced today their new BC Business COVID-19 support service, and this service is operated by the Small Business BC and serves as a one-stop resource that's set up to answer questions about supports available to businesses from the provincial and federal governments, from industry, their various commercial partners, that sort of thing. So the service started today, and it's available Monday to Friday as well as Saturdays. The times change a little bit on Saturday. Also, Small Business BC's website will have a live chat feature, so the inquiries can come in that way or email as well. And the other one that was announced was UBCM. They announced the COVID-19 support team and call center. So that call center officially opened last Friday. It's now open 7 days a week from 7 till 11 p.m. And that center has been established to support the local authority staff. So that's your municipal bylaw officers or your equivalent staff, those ones that are supporting the compliance to the provincial orders to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And that call center is available only to staff. It's not for the public. So there's a toll-free line and online form where your staff can also put their inquiry in. So earlier on, there was a slide that we zipped on past. It'll have information on that. This presentation is, as I mentioned, that it is recorded. It will be made available, and all that information will be on there. Now, really quick, we have 2 minutes. The only thing we'd really like to squeeze in here is we've got a poll that we would love you to answer. And what this is about is about the time that we're doing these weekly meetings. What we're finding is that we want to make sure as BCEDA that we are reaching out to as many communities as possible. And we know there's conflict with other agencies, stakeholders that we want to engage with, that want to engage with us. So if you can pick, and you guys are doing it real quick, thanks so much. The one time that works best for you, that would be awesome. We know we're never going to get 100% consensus, but we do want to make it work the best for you and as many of you as we can. So it looks like we've just got a couple of more coming in. Let's see where we go with that. And just a couple more. And Ashley or Maureen, as we start to wrap up, if there's anything you want to add, that would be awesome. And I think we're about there, so I'm going to end the polling now. And
so while you're tabulating, it's already done.
We're pretty quick.
Look at you go.
So it looks like 2 p.m. still is this, but we'll take this back. We appreciate your feedback on that. Before I wrap up, sorry, Maureen, is there something you'd like to
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule. I know we're all doing 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a day, so I appreciate it. And do send your well wishes to Dale. If you have any questions, email info@BCEDA, or you can even reach out to me. I will try to help you, or at least I can tell you how to get the information you're looking for. So thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing and hearing from everyone again next week.
Absolutely, I echo that, and we'll see who's at the helm there. I don't think it'll be Dale, but you never know. He's a hard worker. So that being said, I agree with Maureen. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate you taking an hour out of your schedule and sitting down with us. And please keep doing what you folks are doing. You're doing great work, and your economies are really going to get back at some point in time, and they're going to get back faster and stronger because of the work you're doing today. So thanks so much. We'll see you next week.